leadership of the African National Congress. For many of our younger members, this will be a remarkable moment to witness a smooth changing of the guard from one president to the next, and a smooth transition from one collective leadership, one collective of leaders to the next. A process so deeply democratic, characteristic of the deep and proud values of the ANC and embedded in its very DNA. The leadership elected at this, the 54th National Conference, will represent that dynamic of continuity and change. A blend of seasoned cadres and leaders of our movement, and the newer and younger leaders possessing a different experience and a new outlook to political and economic issues. Whichever leadership is elected by the 54th National Conference, I am confident that they will undertake their responsibilities with the seriousness it deserves and apply themselves to their mandate in a manner commensurate with the understanding of what our people require from their leadership, fundamentally to transform our society. Whoever emerges as our president after the vote, and whichever collective is elected, I am confident that they will hold the custody of our nation and country as well as is expected of them. The country and the movement are going to be in good hands. I speak with so much confidence because I know that the presidents of the ANC represent the collective will of the members and the leadership of the movement, and implement the policies derived from the national conference and not their own personalized opinions. If I may be so bold, I would like to take this opportunity to suggest to the incoming leadership, whoever they may be, that at this defining moment, the most important task for the African National Congress as the governing party is to lead the country to achieve inclusive growth through radical economic transformation as quickly as is possible. Ours was a struggle for more than formal political democracy. Our struggle for national liberation was bound up with our economic aspirations. Ahead of us lies an entire historical period during which we must intensify the struggle to give birth to new conditions. We are called upon to discern a new path that will lead us to the fulfillment of the objective of national democratic society. Since the attainment of our freedom 23 years ago, we would be correct to say that we have successfully accomplished the political tasks associated with the first phase of the national democratic revolution. Our next challenge is to accomplish a social revolution. What cannot be disputed is that we have made enormous progress since 1994. However, despite all this progress, our country still faces extreme income inequalities, deep poverty, and very high levels of unemployment, particularly affecting the youth. These evil triplets still reflect the old race, class, and gender and geographic features of apartheid colonialism. While this has been mitigated through an expansive social wage, The fact of the matter is that our large social wage bill is as good as it can be a trap if jobs are not created so that people can be gainfully employed and freed from reliance on the state. In this regard, a call for radical socio-economic transformation is relevant. It is a stepping stone towards inclusive growth. There can be no other way forward for our country other than to recognize the social grievance of the majority and to fulfill it. Writing earlier this year about our economic discourse, Professor Stephen Friedman captures this oddity, as he termed it, quite aptly, saying, I quote, "Why should it be interesting that ANC leaders say the economy needs to change radically? It is hard to think of any interest that could argue with a straight face that the economy does not need major change. It has slipped into recession after a long period of weak or non-existent growth. Much of black business and many black professionals insist they are still excluded from its engine room. Continued poverty and inequality confirm that many are denied its benefits. Given all this, supporting radical economic change should be simply a statement of the obvious." Close quote. Professor Friedman goes on to speculate provocatively as to why key economic actors are passive with regard to contributing ideas for a new economic direction, saying, I quote, "The interests who may have something to say are members of the cozy club of insiders. They all know that the economy could be a whole lot better. But since they benefit from what exists, trying to make sure that the government does not damage what they have seems less risky than opting for change. So they react to the ANC if it threatens current arrangements but do not propose something better." Close quote. Our economic discourse must transcend the fear of loss or desire to maintain current privilege. It must be courageous, generous, and creative enough to reimagine what is possible, to build an economy which works for all South Africans and not a select few. The National Development Plan commits us to pursuing growth and economic transformation. We need to do both. Growth without transformation is unjust and will further exacerbate social tensions, fissures, and instability. But transformation without growth is similarly self-defeating. If the economy does not grow, there will be no radical socio-economic transformation to speak of. Inclusive growth is required because all of our social and economic challenges will be easier to address in the context of a rapidly expanding economy. A fast-growing economy creates more opportunities for wealth and employment creation. Businesses see more demand for their products and services and invest accordingly. Workers see more job opportunities and higher wages. The government receives more tax revenues to fund social services and invest in human capabilities and economic infrastructure. Several years of low growth have threatened to derail our progress in addressing the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The credibility and sustainability of the political transition is critically dependent on the transformation of the economy away from its apartheid colonial legacy. There are two elements to this radical economic transformation. The first relates to the need to ensure that the ownership, management, and worker profile at all levels reflects the racial composition of the broader society. And the second relates to the need to transform the sectoral composition of the economy to reflect a post-apartheid industrial economy built on a large, stable and skilled middle class, rather than a capital-intensive economy based on a minerals energy complex. Possibly one of the most crucial steps in this implementation was the decision by the ANC to build a developmental state which has the objective of actively intervening in the economy to drive investment in plant skills and technologies in targeted areas to achieve a long-term vision of a higher value-added, labor-absorptive and racially transformed economy. In order to do this, the state needs, among others, the ability to build strategic coalitions with key players in the economy to drive this agenda of radical socio-economic transformation. Ultimately, as Chalmers Johnson states in the article, The Developmental State Odyssey of a Concept, a state's power lies in or derives from broad-based legitimacy and trust based on its achievements, rather than merely how it came to power. Ultimately, as is the experience of the liberation movements across our continent, the excitement of liberation wears off, and people start asking the question, what has this state that we created achieved to change our lives? Johnson further says that the legitimacy of the leaders of a developmental state comes from people working together. The strength of a developmental state is its ability to forge a common vision for the people and to unite them behind that vision as the organizing philosophy of the nation, so that they all pull towards the same direction. This is what defined and underscored the success of the East Asian developmental states, in addition to forging strategic developmental coalitions. Right at the outset of the Chinese policy of opening up led by Deng Xiaoping, he outlined his vision in an interview in 1979 and said, I quote, "The aim of our revolution is to liberate and expand the productive forces. Without expanding the productive forces, making our country prosperous and powerful, and improving the living standards of the people, our revolution is just empty talk. We oppose the old society and the old system because they oppress the people and fettered the productive forces," close quote. Later on, he proceeded to say, "Of course, we do not want capitalism there in China, but neither do we want to be poor under socialism," quote unquote. And this is an important phrase. We do not liberate ourselves to be poor under the new system that we are creating. The point I am making through this quote is that the new system we are building to replace apartheid colonialism must distinguish itself by its ability to expand the productive forces, make the country prosperous and powerful, and improve the living standards of the people as a whole, especially those hitherto oppressed. The Asian tigers and China have achieved this and built a powerful vision for their societies based on achievements rather than the perpetuity of dreams undergirded by rigid dogmas. We opposed apartheid colonialism not only because it was unjust and repressive, but also because by fettering the productive forces, it denied us the chance to improve the living standards of all the people. As the Chinese have proven, this is not merely a function of ideological dogmatism, but we need to be very pragmatic and engage the power of private sector capital and resourcefulness in pursuit of this goal of radical economic transformation. What the Chinese can teach those of us is executing the national democratic revolution is that the people do not eat ideologies and dogma does not achieve higher growth rates or even inclusive growth. Radical economic transformation cannot be achieved through antagonizing, marginalizing, and even maligning the private sector. We need to harness and provide leadership to private capital in pursuit of the radical economic transformation agenda. Both to get out of the current period of slow growth as well as to achieve high industrialization and inclusive growth, we need the strategic partnership with business, labor, and civil society in general. In an environment of fiscal constraints, business confidence is the cheapest form of economic stimulus. The immediate challenge is to resolve policy uncertainty by adopting and implementing growth-enabling policies. In relation to state-owned companies, particularly Eskom, we need to act decisively to address their governance, management, and financial sustainability. Before I turn to some comments on fiscal policy, I want to emphasize that the fundamental problem we face, which the incoming ANC leadership must confront, is the low growth trap we find ourselves in. Economic growth in the South African economy slowed from 3% in 2012 to 0.3% in 2016. Over the last 2 quarters, we have seen stronger economic activity, largely driven by a recovery in mining and agriculture and stronger household consumption. At the time of the medium-term budget policy statement, we expected growth of about 0.7%. Recent data suggests that economic growth could be close to 1% with further potential for upside surprise. The economy is finally growing, but it is growing slowly, just at or even below the rate of population growth, while demands on government for public services, social spending and investment are increasing. This has increased the pressure on our fiscal framework in the form of persistent budget deficits, leading to our debt to GDP increasing steadily where we would prefer to stabilize it. A sustainable fiscal framework with stable and falling debt is not a concern merely for ratings agencies and investors. It is rather a reflection of our financial health as a country. We take our relative macroeconomic stability for granted, but it is a key asset for a developing country. Sustainable public finances give us the autonomy to decide policies without being pressured or dictated to by international lenders. We should continue zealously to guard and defend our fiscal sovereignty. We will take the necessary tough decisions to continue fiscal consolidation and destabilization as we move towards the 2018 budget in February. This will stabilize public debt in the coming years and ensure macroeconomic stability. However, fiscal consolidation is not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is to reignite growth. Only a return to decent growth will create the conditions to get all our citizens working. create opportunities for widely shared prosperity, and provide government with the resources to fulfill our social needs, invest in human capabilities, and appropriate social and economic infrastructure. To do that, we need to forge a coalition of all social partners for a program of inclusive growth and transformation. We need to leverage our traditional strengths of mining and agriculture. We need to nurture and expand growth sectors such as tourism, renewable energy, and oceans economy. We need to reindustrialize the economy and find niche sectors where we can be globally competitive, such as in advanced manufacturing. To do so, we need to do some difficult things. We need to address education quality and access. To make the most of our young population, we need to graduate competitive matriculants with core skills in reading and comprehension, mathematics, science, critical thinking, and problem solving. We need them to be able to access higher education and vocational training. Issues of access to higher education have been quite rightly brought to the fore by students in recent years. Quality vocational training linked to the skills needs of industry and apprenticeships opportunity is critical for building the skills and capabilities to support industrialization. This has been at the heart of Germany's industrial success, for example. It can also be at the heart of South Africa's industrial success. We need to invest in human capabilities at a massive scale. We need to improve our policy and regulatory environment. We have to do a better job of managing competing demands and imperatives among stakeholders. We cannot have policy stalemates which last for years. Government needs to move at the speed of business, not vice versa. We need to put in place the conditions to be globally competitive. We cannot have logistics costs which are higher than our developing country peers and expect to industrialize rapidly. We need to build a social compact between business and labor where workers receive a greater share of profits in exchange for higher productivity. We need to invest in knowledge and innovation to be competitive in the fourth industrial revolution and the industries of the future. We need a dynamic SME sector and venture capital environment. We need to address the trust deficit in government and the private sector. We need to fully investigate allegations of state capture and public corruption to restore citizens' trust in government. If citizens do not trust government, even worthy programs will be difficult to implement. We need to address governance failures in the private sector, especially with regards to the independence of audit firms, audit committees, and non-executive directors, and deal decisively with instances of corporate fraud and corruption. The Steinhoff saga must receive the same amount of public scrutiny as all other allegations and instances of public sector corruption. Ultimately, we need to act decisively to restore public confidence in our public and corporate leadership, as well as in our reputation as a country. In this regard, we need a united and decisive response. Not to be vocal selectively and silent in other instances when it suits us or when it's uncomfortable to be vocal. In conclusion, I would like to encourage the incoming national leadership of the African National Congress, rather than be daunted by the many challenges facing our country, to see opportunities and be resolute in uniting the movement and the nation. I would like to encourage the incoming leadership to be decisive in speedily implementing the resolutions adopted by the conference. Because in many instances, uncertainty is created not by a difference of opinion about adopted policies, but by mere lack of implementation. Our people are hungry for change. But our people are also resilient and dynamic, and will welcome progress. All eyes are on the ANC. The country is looking to us for leadership. We dare not disappoint them. Let us grab the mantle to offer a compelling vision and forge once again a dynamic and developmental coalition of all social partners to build the South Africa we want. One that works for all who live in it. The change in leadership provides a grandiose opportunity for continuity and change. This is the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are now going to start the conversation. So if I can ask you to indicate